Somewhere beneath the frozen soil of northeastern China, the bones of thousands of people remain unaccounted for. They were prisoners, Chinese, Korean, Russian, American, and what was done to them inside a heavily guarded compound in Manchuria represents one of the most disturbing chapters of the Second World War, a chapter that powerful governments actively chose to bury. The facility was called Unit 731. Officially, it didn't exist. Begun in the early 1930s under the command of Lieutenant General Shiro Ishii, the unit operated as Japan's covert biological and chemical warfare research program. It was headquartered near the city of Harbin in Japanese-occupied Manchuria, a remote, frozen location chosen deliberately, far from scrutiny, far from conscience. At its peak, the compound sprawled across 6 square kilometers. It housed laboratories, frostbite chambers, pressure rooms, and a crematorium. The prisoners held inside were not referred to as human beings. They were called marutas, a Japanese word meaning logs, disposable, interchangeable, fuel. What happened inside those walls is documented in post-war testimonies, survivor accounts, and declassified intelligence files. Prisoners were deliberately infected with plague, cholera, typhoid, and anthrax, not to treat them, but to study how fast the diseases would kill. Victims were subjected to vivisection, dissected while still alive and conscious, so researchers could observe organ function in real time. Frostbite experiments saw prisoners have their limbs immersed in freezing water until the tissue was destroyed. Pressure experiments pushed human bodies to the point of rupture. Estimates of the total death toll range from 3,000 to over 10,000 people. And then, in the final days of the war, the evidence was destroyed. Buildings were demolished. Records were burned. The remaining prisoners were executed to silence what they had witnessed. Ishii ordered his staff to scatter, to disappear, and to never speak of what they had done. But here's where the story takes a turn that still provokes outrage. After Japan's surrender, American intelligence operatives tracked down Shiro Ishii and his senior researchers. They had something Washington wanted desperately: decades of biological weapons data. Data gathered through experiments no ethical scientist could ever conduct. The deal that followed was chilling in its simplicity: immunity from war crimes prosecution in exchange for handing over the research. Ishii was never tried. He died a free man in 1959. Many of his colleagues went on to prominent careers in Japanese medicine, academia, and business. The data was quietly absorbed into American biological defense research programs. The Soviet Union did hold its own trials, the Khabarovsk war crime trials of 1949, convicting 12 members of Unit 731. But those proceedings were largely dismissed in the West as Cold War propaganda, and the full weight of international justice never fell on the program's architects. Decades passed before Japan began to formally acknowledge that Unit 731 had existed at all. Survivor testimonies were suppressed, textbooks stayed silent. It wasn't until the 1980s that Japanese investigative journalists and historians forced the story into public view, piece by devastating piece. Today, a museum stands on the former site of the compound near Harbin. The ruins are preserved. The evidence is there for anyone willing to look. And yet, no complete accounting of the victims has ever been made. No full list of names. No final reckoning. The data obtained through those experiments, data extracted through suffering that cannot be described in clinical language, may well have contributed to research that continues to protect lives today. Which raises a question that has no comfortable answer. If knowledge built on atrocity is used to save lives, does that make the atrocity more forgivable, or simply more permanent?